Luxury cars, bimbos aplenty, and luxurious villas. For years, the life of Kim.com seemed entirely dedicated to pleasure and extravagance. This whimsical German with an impressive physique is the creator of Megaupload, the site used by everyone during the 2000s to illegally download films and MP3s. A site which made his name and fortune, but which would make him one of the enemies of the American state and the top Hollywood studios.
His life was one long TV series, one long film, or one long YouTube video.
The FBI suddenly put an end to this life of showing off and constant partying in 2012, terminating the German giant's delusions of grandeur. On the 20th of January in the early morning, 70 police officers and several helicopters entered Kim.com's mansion in New Zealand. Worthy of a Hollywood action movie, the arrest was brief but spectacular. These surveillance videos, broadcast worldwide, would help build his image as a martyr of the internet.
The war for the internet has begun.
Since, Kim.com has been a man closely monitored by the law. He isn't allowed to leave his country. He's like a prisoner on his Pacific island.
He's continued to be in this position of defiance, of non-conformism, etc., by saying, look, I'm still the same, I've not changed, and I'm going to fight.
Recounting the life of Kim.com is revealing the unexpected rise of a young computer hacker from nothing. An anonymous, talentless hacker hung up over his physical appearance, who benefited from the beginnings of the deregulated internet to build a new, kitsch, flamboyant personality.
He's a character who plays with his image. He built himself an image. Firstly, his name isn't Kim.com, his real name is Kim Schmitz. He's German. He's someone who came from quite a modest background. He had nothing needed to succeed.
To better understand who Kim.com really is, we've returned to the footsteps of his childhood in an austere suburb in northern Germany. We've also penetrated the closed environment of hackers in Berlin in the 90s, who saw this average and not very gifted hacker transformed into scheme-ready businessman of the net. We've also managed to remotely interview one of his most loyal collaborators, his discreet right hand in the Megaupload nebula, Emmanuel Gade. With this self-congratulatory communication, Kim.com built a real smokescreen. It's difficult to sort fact from fiction in a shadowy journey. Between his nouveau riche showing off, small scams and genius ideas, here is the incredible story of mega pirate Kim.com. On the 21st of January 1974, Kim.com, real name Kim Schmitz, was born in Kiel, a small port town in the north of Germany. His father was a sailor and worked at the port every day as a ship's captain. His mother, Annelie, was a cook from Finland. The Schmitz family led a modest life in Mettenhof, a soulless suburb on the outskirts of Kiel, made from blocks of flats which all look alike. Behind his big child smile, it's hard to imagine that Kim's youth was particularly difficult.
He came from a proletarian background. His father was an alcoholic. His mother was depressed. They lived in a sad northern Germany where nothing happened.
An alcoholic, Helmut Schmitz regularly beat his wife and son. Under his repeated blows, Kim and his mother sometimes even ended up in hospital. Frightened by her husband's dangerous anger, Annelie fled to protect Kim from his father's fits of rage. In 1985, the young boy was 11. He grew very quickly and was over 2 meters tall. An unconventional size. Too tall, too big, and regularly subjected to the jeers of his schoolmates, Kim became an introverted and withdrawn boy. One evening, in an attempt to brighten up her son's life, Annelie Schmitz brought home a strange machine, a Commodore.
This mother, who felt guilty seeing the sad life of her little boy, who isn't doing well at school, this mother would save and bleed to pay for this console, to buy him this computer.
Douglas Alvis is a former hacker who met Kim on the internet a few years later. He well understands the reaction the young German had when faced with his computer.
For someone who could be withdrawn or did not lead a very exciting life, video games and computer science was a way for him to learn by himself, a way to travel by playing games, and to have new experiences, to learn new things that he didn't have the opportunity to do in his everyday life.
Kim spent more and more time on his Commodore. He very quickly became an expert of this strange computer, which was simply a keyboard connected to a television. From his room, the teenager escaped a joyless daily life where everything looked alike. He gradually found refuge in the phantasmagorical and colourful imagination of video games.
One may wonder if, as an obese child and even an obese teenager, the complex that created made it so he had to find a place where he came out on top. This machine would somehow compensate for all the shortcomings in his family circle and allow him to dive into another world. And, in fact, from there he would start what his life would be, that is, IT computers.
At age 13, in 1987, constantly immersed in his Commodore, Kim would discover that he could, thanks to his machine, do things other than play. He gradually began programming and tweaking lines of computer code.
When using a computer at the time, people tended to really understand what was in the computer. When people bought a Commodore 64, or any 8-bit computer of the time, there was no graphical OS like today with Windows, folders, a desktop. There was a BASIC that appeared most of the time, an academic programming language. It was a real invitation to programming.
For hours, Kim perfected his mastery of computer code. Even if his computer was basic, it managed to connect to some kind of ancient version of the internet that used telephone lines. What's known as the BBS network. There he discovered a community of enthusiasts far beyond the borders of his small suburb.
I mean, you live in Kiel, you are a nerd in a time where most people don't even know what a nerd is. And then, yeah, then the internet and the online community made life a lot easier for you, no matter how you looked. You know, pre-versions of the internet have been huge reliefs for him because he could easily connect to people that lived somewhere else. He didn't have to leave his house. He just had to use his computer.
It was an international community before the internet existed. That is, that programs and games were exchanged by BBS, even by post.
On the BBS, these pre-internet networks, the young Kim collected free games. In 1989, he was 15 when he understood that with simple lines of code, he could easily copy these games onto floppy disks. The teenager would sell these pirate games quickly to make some pocket money. Dirk Engling is the spokesman of the CCC, one of the most powerful groups of hackers in the world, a closed and very discreet club who agreed to talk about Kim Schmitz. Dirk worked with him and for him, there's no doubt. From the 80s, with these games on disc, Kim began mixing money and pirated copies.
He started out when others on the school ground would just share games on cassettes back then. He would be the one who sold the games after making copies to his fellows, and that pattern was could be seen all over his life.
With this easily earned money, Kim could now buy the modern computers he dreamed of being able to afford. He left school to give everything to his passion. Things were clear for him. Thanks to his computer skills, he could now make a name and leave the gloominess of Kiel.
himself says he has not been really happy as a child, and his life shows he was eager to leave the little German town of Kiel and Plön in the north of Germany and become something greater and something people would know all over the world. And probably it's not possible to do this when you are, you know, Mr. Schmitz, which is one of the most common names in Germany ever, from Kiel.
Kim Schmitz arrived in Berlin in 1990. The wall dividing the city in two had just fallen, and enthusiasm was rife. The new capital was firing on all cylinders.
There was an incredible buzz. There was an emulation. Many computer enthusiasts agreed to meet in Berlin, did meet there. There were circles of computer enthusiasts, and he would join these circles. This kid, in fact, would geographically migrate to enter these circles, to meet, to learn. And obviously, by going to Berlin, he also changed his life. That is to say, for once, he went to a city where things were happening and where things could happen for him.
Having barely arrived, the teenager headed for Alexanderplatz. There he found in this building the largest group of computer hackers in Europe, the CCC, for Chaos Computer Club. Over the weeks, the big guy hung around these corridors more and more, attentive to the numerous conferences of this gathering of anarchic and rebellious hackers. Their spokesman remembers the utopia which prevailed in this environment then.
Back then it was enthusiasts who got themselves computers and wanted to understand how they work. There were philosophers who understood that computers can be used to make the world a better place. And, well, lunatics, as always in movements that well, changed the world.
These hackers were computer enthusiasts, mostly people with slightly left-wing tendencies, left-wingers in a philosophy of sharing, not money. For the hackers, it wasn't about money. They were passionate about their tools. They were people who constantly spoke in technical language, so nobody understood anything about IT and computers at the time. They only understood each other.
To become a member of the CCC, Kim Schmitz had to prove his worth by demonstrating strong computer skills. But from the first programming sessions around a computer, the young man proved to be far less gifted than he thought.
To some people who regard themselves as hackers, Kim Schmitz has been not more than a script kiddie. A script kiddie is somebody who sort of steals or works with hacking methods other people have developed, but is not able to come up with his own ideas in terms of hacking.
Kim wasn't necessarily a very good hacker, and on the contrary was someone who was very clever in using the tools of others, of other programmers, for his own gains. Because he understood technology. He wasn't a complete ignoramus either. Rather, he was someone who understood the advantage he could gain from this environment and this atmosphere.
Although not a computer heavyweight, Kim soon realized the benefits that could be derived from this band of pirates. Hanging around in the CCC corridors, the giant befriended young hackers who were far more talented than him. It was during this time that he met Emmanuel Gadet, a French computer engineer, online. Years later, the man would become one of the senior officers of Megaupload, alongside Kim.com.
We were all part of this environment of European hackers in the late 1980s, early 90s. We already knew each other online. Kim was already into bluffing. He wasn't really a talented hacker at the time, even if he was trying to be. He has an extraordinary talent of surrounding himself with competent people, and especially convincing them to work for him. He's someone with a very particular personality. He knows how to attract, and manipulate isn't really the word, but let's say make people follow him, be passionate about what he does, and want to do it with him.
Surrounded by young hackers, Kim remembered the videos he sold in the school courtyard. He proceeded to get into the resale of other more profitable data. His group, which he called Dope, managed to steal a list of PBX codes from the computer servers of American companies. Codes that allowed free use of phones, which he then resold at full price on pirate networks.
Legislation and executive forces had no idea of what was going on at all. And so and technology was not really advanced, so it was pretty easy to find loopholes where you could sort of enter the system and make money by selling telephone cards or by finding out how to use your telephone even on international landlines for free, how to sell, you could sell that knowledge to others.
Kim had not so much a hacker attitude, but he could see if there was money in anything that hackers did, that hackers just didn't want to monetize. So he was very good at not having any conscience at all. I think he could smell that there's some money to be made in the hacker scene, and so he pretended to be part of it.
Thanks to this trading of telephone codes, at just 18 years old, Kim forged a small reputation in the Berlin underground. It was during this time he first changed his name. He was now known as Kimble, a nickname inspired by the main character of an old TV series, The Fugitive.
This boy was, as a kid, fascinated by an American series, in France too, named The Fugitive, a series from the 60s which tells the story of a character, Mr. Kimble, Richard Kimble, who was prosecuted for a crime he didn't commit. Schmitz would use this name and make it his first alias. He was just 20 years old. That is, he would rechristen himself with the name of a sympathetic hero who was a victim of a system. He would call himself Kimble. That is to say, I'm a nice man and I am fighting against the bad guys. And who are the bad guys? People far more powerful than you or I.
On the 21st of December 1992, when Forbes magazine dedicated a feature to the hacker movement, it was Kimble that the journalist chose as a spokesman for this new kind of criminal.
Take this 19-year-old kid called Kimble. Located in Germany, he is the leader of Dope, an international group of hackers. Kimble is also one of his country's most famous hackers.
Following the article, Kim boasted and bragged about being a little computer genius. He even mocked the German authorities and mocked the delay of privacy laws in his country.
Kimble uses a special program created by him and claims to be able to steal 6 PBX codes per day. He explains that he escapes prosecution because the anti-piracy laws are more lax in Germany than the United States. Each PBX code is like an open door for me, he brags, claiming to have now recovered a total of 500.
In just a few months, the German giant accumulated over $200,000 with his telephone codes. The former poor boy from Kiel spent all of his money on computers. He was now showing off more and more and bought his first luxury car in 1992, a Mercedes. Kim, hungry for extreme sensations, seemed to want to make up for his sad and boring adolescence. With music blaring, he spent his time pushing his car to over 260 kilometers an hour on German motorways, taking foolish risks. In 1994, his taste for speed would almost kill him. One night, he lost control of his Mercedes and hit a tree. His girlfriend was seriously injured, but he miraculously escaped with just a broken arm. 20 years later, he would return to this accident in a biography dedicated to him. He said he had a kind of epiphany when he woke up in hospital.
This is what I understood, there, in my hospital bed. I thought, man, I'm going to live my life to the fullest. I don't give a damn about what people think. I'm going to do what I want, what I love, because life is short. For me, money is a tool for having experiences, rather than for accumulating in the bank. For me, money's made to be spent on having a good life, because it could end at any moment. That's really where my whole lifestyle began.
But before even having time to live his dream fully, Kim Schmitz suffered a second hard blow. His statements in the press had attracted the attention of the German authorities. At the end of 1994, the police raided his apartment. $80,000 worth of equipment was seized, and the pirate was thrown into prison. But surprisingly, after 3 months in custody, Kim was sentenced to just a 2-year suspended sentence. It must be said that at the time, the Justice Department didn't understand anything about this new kind of digital crime and let Kim Schmitz leave the court freely. Back to square one, Kim wanted to immediately regain financial health. He would then take advantage of the blatant lack of security which prevailed over the computer networks of the big companies at the time.
At the level of institutions and big companies, in terms of computer protection, it was rubbish. In '92, you could take an Atari ST with a good modem, with the correct configuration. It was often necessary to have it imported from the United States. With a basic tutorial, you could get into any bank and look at anyone's account at the time.
Profoundly affected by his stay in prison, Kim Schmitz knew that he would now have to give his activities a legal front. So instead of directly hacking into these firms, he changed tack and decided to set up his own company, Data Protect. His idea: to introduce himself to big bosses as a dangerous hacker and to impose the threat of computer piracy onto them. Once he retained their attention, he would sell them protection services, promising to secure their confidential data and prevent any digital intrusion.
He was the one to call companies like the predecessor for Deutsche Telekom and say you have a, you have a security hole in your systems, and they gave him money and even gave him a job, to what I know. And so he has always been the sort of person who was able to turn knowledge into money.
It's difficult to imagine that large companies would agree to entrust access to their networks to a well-known hacker fresh out of prison. And yet the bluff worked. Lufthansa Airline, telephone operator Vodafone, car manufacturer Daimler, and even the German stock exchange accepted Kim Schmitz's deal.
At the time, I don't think most company directors were necessarily aware of what computer security was. Data processing was making its entry into the systems of companies, and so it was rather easy to pose as the savior.
Companies were recruiting hackers with fairly advanced technical skills to handle computer security, because who better to take care of the computer security of a structure than someone who is capable of conducting this type of attack? Nowadays, the world of computer security is very developed. But in the late 90s, it was just beginning, and Kim's company was very successful, since it employed talented hackers who had strong track records, so that gave him an initial success.
By becoming a businessman thanks to the technological secrets of the hackers, Kim Schmitz had betrayed his environment. This was too much for the idealists of the Chaos Computer Club. One day, during a CCC meeting, Kim tried to sneak in to recruit new geniuses. But Dirk Engling and some colleagues refused to let him do so.
2 other people and I were forcing him off the conference ground. Well, he was quite outraged. He was a person non grata on our events.
All these hacker communities have always been very attached to their legitimacy, to being seen as virtuous people who were improving the world, etc. At one point, Dotcom didn't even keep up the pretense of wanting to share anything whatsoever. He just wanted to make money.
If the hacker environment had turned its back on Kim Schmitz, he didn't care. He no longer needed them to continue thriving. His new challenge: to invest before anyone else in a brand new technology that looked promising, the Internet. In 1997, he created 2 startups. Monkey AG was all about online payment solutions using mobile phones. And Megacar, a company intended to allow people to pick up high-speed internet in their cars.
The late 90s brought the madness of the dot-com era. the internet arrived. Financial markets were valuing companies with no income at millions, even tens of millions of dollars. So it was a bit of a crazy time. Kim is somewhat the emblem of that time. He knew how to surf the wave of the internet. And at the time, everyone, all bankers, all businessmen, wanted to invest in something hot on the internet.
However, despite his talents as a salesman, Kim Schmitz was unable to launch his startups because the technology wasn't really at that point yet. In the press of the time, he intentionally displayed vague financial results and unveiled a fortune which varied between 100 and 200 million euro, depending on the interview.
It's true that there was a lot of vagueness. Already at the time, you know, when a company capitalizes, the shareholders become very rich. But it's not real wealth, rather wealth on paper. So Kim was also very wealthy on paper, meaning that things could evaporate overnight. I don't even know if it would be possible to really know what happened at the time. What's for certain is that he had large sums of money, that he blew it, and that he lost everything, and earned it all back several times.
The German constantly wanted to convince more investors, so to hide the poor results of his startups, he put a real smokescreen in place by leveraging his best selling point: himself. His aim? To present himself as a successful man against whom nothing could resist. To do this, he would create the public image of an excessive character, a megalomaniac worth millions.
Indeed, I think that this was the moment when he realized that his best marketing asset was himself. It was him personally. It was the way in which he marketed stuff, the way in which he sold himself as a personality.
First step, the look. Gone were the suits of a respectable businessman, Kim Schmitz made himself a kind of comic book villain costume. From then on in his photos, he only appeared wearing a jacket, trousers and black t-shirt. And his sunglasses were permanently attached to his face. The man had an eye-catching physique. He was over 2 meters tall and weighed 140 kilos, so the result was unstoppable.
He began to have this look with his long, loose black clothes and his little smoked glasses, which also strengthened again this side of being somewhat at the limit of legality. A little mafiosi, a little gangster, but gangster chic, gangster cool.
If Kim.com had looked like a pale little man, all skinny and squat, I don't think he'd have had as much interest from the media. Whereas here you have a kind of bad boy, and frankly, just publishing a photo or a good headline was enough to inspire reading. And I think that this image he created is also what made him.
At the same time, Kim developed his internet site, Kimble.org.
Welcome to the Kimble.
Most links were dedicated to his new comic book character.
Kim Vester rules.
Kim put countless pictures of himself on his travels around the world online. He was pictured in front of private jets, luxury cars, and helicopters. But none of this belonged to him. Most of the time, he was just posing near planes that didn't belong to him. And even the bimbos with which he appeared were most often paid for the picture.
He was seen in photos behind the wheel of his cars with the license plates, Mafia, God, etc., which denotes a megalomania which he barely hid. He was seen in a jacuzzi, fully dressed, surrounded by naiads, etc. He still had, actually I don't know if there was a desire for revenge on life, but in any case, he had a desire to show that he was successful, that he'd succeeded, and that he was proud of the success, and that he had no hang-ups over it.
The strategy worked. Kim Schmitz gradually established his rich millionaire character with an excessive lifestyle in the German media landscape.
Kimble.org proudly presents Kimble Goes Monaco.
In 2000, he went even further and produced Kimble Goes Monaco, a 30-minute documentary on a weekend with his friends. In these pictures, he portrayed himself showing off, posing in front of a battery of brand new Ferraris and driving at full speed towards Monaco, music blaring.
He would very quickly stage his own legend. construct his own character, who became a bad boy, beautiful girls, fast cars, friends, big stakes, casinos. He paid a TV production team to follow him everywhere, and he would be filmed, personally producing films about himself. That is, that he built his own legend, he filmed it, he put it together, and all that obviously was accessible to everyone on the internet.
In front of the cameras, he rented a huge yacht and organised a lavish party. There we discovered a big, whimsical kid who played like a madman surrounded by jet-setters. In the course of the plan, he didn't forget to show that he could also discuss things as an equal with an established businessman like Richard Branson.
He managed to become famous, and this strategy of putting on a performance and showing himself with the world's greats, in quotes, was also a way of protecting himself. Because when you are shown with respectable people, you can also pass for someone respectable.
Was das hier heißt, Kim Schmitz and Associates.
There's also a claim behind this that is often found in geek or nerd culture, which is virility. The geek's ideal is somewhat the same as that of a rapper. It's a bimbo with fantasies of a swimming pool full of naked girls, of fast cars. That's somewhat the rapper world too.
Kim Schmitz bragged of having spent €1 million to produce this video and put it online for free, without any financial return. In reality, its sole purpose was to show off his billionaire jet-set lifestyle.
The movie is over. Go and find more on Kimble's homepage.
In 2001, Kim was 27 when he realized the internet bubble was about to burst, so he resold 80% of the shares in his companies to a German holding company, TÜV Rheinland. His ploy worked, and the leaders of the holding company trusted him blindly, fooled by his image as a young, successful entrepreneur. For Kim, it was a hot deal. He announced that he earned approximately €160 million by selling his startups.
Kim had this talent of entering a room full of German bankers, all in ties, serious, etc. An hour later, when they emerged, they were all in love with him. They wanted to invest everything into his business. They wanted to follow him everywhere, to take advantage of this opportunity, of this frenzy of the internet business.
When he sold his empty shells and pocketed in concrete terms millions of dollars at the time when he had this internet bubble, the millions of dollars really were in his account, so he was really rich, he had achieved his goal.
A few months later, the German conglomerate which bought the shares from Kim Schmitz became disillusioned. The Kimble.org nebula, which they'd just acquired, boiled down to a few companies that would never make any profit. The TÜV Rheinland spokesman unloaded in the press. Everything that flourished around Mr. Schmitz is doubtful, and I am choosing my words carefully. The same year, the 27-year-old giant once again appeared in the press. Kim Schmitz was now interested in an e-commerce startup, Let's Buy It. He'd just bought €400,000 of shares in this company, which was losing momentum. And bragging, he announced with great fanfare that he intended to keep investing much more.
He would play a communication game, in fact, but saying, voila, this is my business, I'm going to save it. It's Bernard Tapie, it's Bernard Tapie, the same thing. I'm going to save it. I bought it back, I take back my shares, etc.
Let's Buy It was one of the new internet companies that were struggling, and Kim Schmitz announced he would invest €50 million into the company, which would have helped the company a lot. And he called himself Kimvestor in these days, and well, he didn't, but the stock went up.
The stock markets reacted very quickly, and the Let's Buy It shares immediately soared by 220%. In the aftermath, rather than investing even more like he'd promised, Kim Schmitz resold his shares. In just a few weeks, he'd earned €1,100,000 on this simple deal, and let the company go bankrupt. But it was a clumsy maneuver, and the Justice Department launched an investigation. Kim Schmitz was arrested and went back to prison for a second time. After 6 months' imprisonment, he was convicted of insider trading and given a €100,000 fine and a 20-month suspended sentence.
He went back to prison for a second time after his scams in Germany, which would take more of a toll on him than when he was younger. The first time he went from gloominess to prison, this time he went from extravagance to prison. So the contrast was a bit violent and his time in prison went badly, which meant that he would leave Germany saying, "I don't understand anything here. I have nothing left to do in this country."
In 2001, he moved to Hong Kong. The island had just been returned to China, and it was the ideal place for someone who wanted to hide their money.
Hong Kong at the time remained a special administrative zone, and therefore it was extremely attractive for Kim.com to move to Hong Kong to take advantage of the benefits and discretion offered by this region, which was under Chinese management, but not really. So he kind of took advantage of all that.
From his tax haven, Kim decided to lead the good life and spare no expense. He now seemed addicted to the cameras and continued being filmed in increasingly outlandish situations. In this video, he has a good time scaring the locals by shouting at them with a megaphone. Exuberance, which would become more and more extreme. In 2004, to pursue his passion for speed, he took part in Kimble 3000, a wild car race in which participants cross Europe as quickly as possible. Often in defiance of all laws.
The door's fucked, but we are still first.
And the highway code.
He took part in Kimble 3000, which is a kind of wild rally for the mega-rich. He revelled in being a champion at this too. The fact that he was a video game champion. There's both a bombastic side and a very childish, playful side to this. You get the impression he's a big kid who takes a perverse pleasure in annoying people, in doing stuff as he wishes, in making fun of some conventions, in making fun of good taste.
He regularly tried, unsuccessfully, to send these videos to all his contacts on the internet. Impossible. Digital video files are too large to be sent by email. These files accumulating on Kim's computer would give him an idea that would change his life. His lawyer, Robert Amsterdam, still remembers the story.
He wanted to send out his races to friends and acquaintances around the world. And he decided that, well, he realized that his, they call it gumball races, couldn't work on the internet. He couldn't send it out. So he and his team got together and invented, really in a way, this type of technology, worked with this type of technology, and that's how it began.
Kim asked his inner circle of programmers to design a small internet site which would allow large files to be uploaded. Then, thanks to a simple link, anyone would be able to download it. He called this site in all humility Megaupload, a solution which seemed revolutionary then, but he was the only one to grasp its full potential.
He suggested it to me, and I must admit that at first, file sharing on the internet wasn't really something I was fascinated with, so that it didn't really interest me. I didn't have the same vision as him. I didn't think that that would develop so much. But as we said earlier, he had this kind of awareness, of business intuition. He knew it was going to work. So he told his team, "Let's go. Even if you don't believe in it, don't worry, it'll work one day."
For 3 years, Kim's intuition proved rather disappointing. Megaupload was slow in finding its audience and wasn't profitable. In 2007, it was the customers, used to illegally downloading MP3 and DivX files, who would change the situation. Millions of people who had become accustomed to illegally downloading movies and music for free.
It was in some way the first peer-to-peer model. That is to say, the Napster and e-mule era, which was starting to disappear because in lots of countries, including France, the authorities were monitoring internet exchanges and punishing internet users who shared too much.
In response to the anti-piracy laws like Hadopi, which were emerging, all those users would then turn towards Megaupload, which allowed them more discretion.
It has this slightly magical side. That is to say that it was a free service, once again, unlimited and accessible to all.
And also Megaupload was a very, very well-designed website, and it was used very soon by all kinds of people to share stuff that you would usually pay for.
So Kim Schmitz felt that he had a deal to play. He gradually transformed his site into a cash machine. Obviously, Megaupload was already funded by advertising, but that wasn't all. The site was very simple to use. A single click on a big orange button, and internet users could start downloading a free album. But to start several faster downloads, you had to pay.
The first key to profitability for Kim.com was to provide a paid service, a premium service that cost a few dozen euro and which enabled internet users to download much faster and to download multiple files per day, multiple files at the same time, etc. So that premium service paid off tremendously because any internet users wanting to take full advantage of the Megaupload service were obligated to pay.
The simplicity of the formula hit the mark, and users came in their millions.
He extended his operations from Hong Kong to install servers all over the world and found himself as a behemoth of internet traffic, since at one time, according to service providers, internet operators shall we say, Kim.com may have represented as much as 4% of worldwide internet traffic, which is absolutely insane.
Megaupload revenues soared, yet Kim Schmitz remained vague on the real incomes of his site. Emmanuel Gade managed the Megaupload Galaxy payment system for him. Even today, he avoids the issue when we ask him the question.
What is certain is that Megaupload made a lot of money because there were a lot of users. So when you have tens of millions of users, there are necessarily tens of millions coming back in income. So yes, it really was a business that was wildly successful and brought in a lot of money. But to tell you if that amount is correct or not, well, I'm not an accountant.
It's estimated that in this period, the Megaupload revenue amounted to between 40 and 50 million euro per year. In 2010, Kim was 36, and his megalomania peaked when he officially changed his identity. Kim Schmitz was transformed into Kim.com.
It's something for years before that. He'd already been saying he wanted the domain name Kim.com. He wanted everything to be Kim something. .com was the madness of the internet. It was a kind of rather funny whim. It really amused him, now that the media and the whole world would be forced to call him Kim.com.
It's just a great idea because Kim.com is a name, it's understood worldwide, everybody can relate to it. It is easy, or sort of easy, to turn into a trademark.
What is Kim.com? It's his first name Kim, and .com is .com, which everyone knows. That is to say, he combined his identity with his success, that is to say, computing. He is single-handedly the internet. He alone is the world. And the whole world uses .com and knows this nickname, which is great. That's what he wanted to say. I'm a small guy from northern Germany, the son of nothing. I am the world. I am .com.
He is a character. He is no longer Kim Schmitz. It's really a kind of avatar, but an avatar which would have completely replaced the real person today, which is Kim Schmitz.
This character, Kim.com, like the incarnation of a video game villain, definitely seemed to have taken over the former Kim Schmitz. In summer 2010, he left Hong Kong and moved to New Zealand. He chose a house which lived up to his image and rented the most expensive home in the country. Mary Alex Brooker was a journalist. She met Kim.com at his home during a television report.
Suddenly, in the middle of nowhere, by car, you stumble upon a hill upon which stands a witch house. A kind of mansion, really. He had put up gigantic giraffes and elephants in composite materials. He had created a kind of savannah in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the New Zealand countryside. He built his own little magical, kind of dreamy world.
Upon her arrival on the grounds, she discovered an extravagant man, a media beast who knew how to get noticed.
It was he who told us to park down below and who went off like that, in his car, to the top of his hill and put on a show for us. That's it. He set the scene. He knew that we would use it. He was sure we'd present him that way. He knew television very well.
On the huge 60-hectare field, an inordinate mansion.
To start with, Kim.com's house was already huge. There were innumerable number of rooms. I probably wouldn't be able to find my way again if I had to go there all alone. It was very kitsch, that is to say, very stucco, lots of marble. It's absolutely huge. He's a fan of slightly kitschy decor. There was one room that particularly struck me. You go upstairs, there's a bedroom and Kim.com's suite with his bathroom. Then, beside the bathroom, there was a swimming corridor. Kim.com had built it on the first floor in order to exercise a little, to keep fit. At the end of this swimming corridor, you have a huge mosaic with a photo of Kim.com. There was a real personality cult. This man loved himself. He knew that he was brilliant and didn't hesitate to show it. He had no complex over it.
On the 31st of December 2010, to celebrate his arrival on New Zealand soil with great fanfare, he funded the New Year fireworks in Auckland to the tune of €500,000. Pictures offered by a Kim.com conquering all the inhabitants of the country. This limitless extravagance and his taste for the media would precipitate the fall of the German giant. The cinema and music industry worldwide entered the war against online cultural piracy. Even if Megaupload was far from being the only site used for illegal downloading, the indiscreet personality of its owner would garner a great deal of attention.
You should know that Kim.com still managed the feat of making himself an enemy of all the Hollywood production studios. None of them agreed with him. That is the giants of cinema. We're talking Warner Brothers, Paramount, who all decided to sue him because they collectively felt that since the creation of Megaupload, they had lost $500 million of revenue. It was absolutely insane.
Kim.com was clearly the person to bring down for the authorities because he was the one who most expressed himself on the internet, in the media, etc. So he was the figurehead of piracy, let's say. The states hated him the most, so obviously they had to have the head of Kim.com. Clearly, aiming for Kim.com was a strategy that allowed them to aim for the head, if you will, of the piracy empire and bring down the rest almost without lifting a finger.
Determined to protect their cultural identity, the American authorities absolutely wanted to shut down Megaupload. First, they tried to attack Kim.com's finances, unsuccessfully.
His fortune, actually, had been very well managed because it was hidden. There were holding companies belonging to holding companies belonging to holding companies belonging to his associates, to his wife. So his money was scattered all over the world.
It was also impossible to accurately identify the computer servers used by Megaupload. They were hidden all over the world. Then, with the support of the New Zealand government, the FBI came in strong. They filed a complaint against Kim.com and launched a blitz attack for his arrest.
All call signs, all call signs.
On the 20th of January 2012, the day before his 38th birthday, Kim.com saw 76 armed men and 2 combat helicopters land on his lawn. The man was surprised. He thought he was untouchable.
Nobody saw it coming, because he'd already spent a fortune on lawyers to remain within the legal framework. He had lawyers in Hong Kong, lawyers in countries where it was important, and in the major markets. At no time did anyone suspect that this would become his future. There's absolutely no way this was envisaged.
But the operation was no joke. Kim.com and all his associates were thrown in prison. His accounts were completely emptied. His numerous luxury cars were seized, and Megaupload was immediately closed down.
There was an FBI raid on his property, where the men came armed and helmeted to seize absolutely everything. We saw these images of all his luxury cars mounted on New Zealand impound vehicles. all of Kim.com's property was evacuated like that. He was actually arrested as an international drug dealer. And that also shows the determination the US authorities had at that time to bring him down. That is to say that he had become not public enemy number one, but certainly a big enough fish for them to want to use such substantial resources to arrest him.
A strong-armed arrest which would come back on the FBI. These images were seen around the world. It was Kim.com himself who made them public, using them as the main part of his defense strategy. By broadcasting them, he built up the image of an innocent victim being harassed by the authorities. His lawyer, Robert Amsterdam, didn't hesitate to mention the conspiracy Hollywood had stirred up against his client.
I think, in many ways, I call it the takedown of Kim.com, is a reflection of this attempt by Hollywood to create this figure of evil. We have documents that Hollywood people had prepared years before to show that the term pirate, which they've tried to apply to this website, was a term that was developed for them by their own lawyers and spin people years and years before, to try to use this terrible term of piracy to explain what was going on. Because you see, there's a huge gap between the civil disputes that go on over copyright every day and trying to charge somebody criminally for copyright infringement is done with the intent of making him appear to be a dangerous pirate. If Hollywood wanted to design an enemy, he'd look and act like him. And I think that's been part of the problem.
In February 2012, Kim.com was released on bail. Under house arrest, he was like a prisoner in his mansion with a ban on connecting to the internet. Over the months, his defense used irregularities in the judicial process to soften the sentence and delay Kim.com's extradition to the United States for as long as possible. He could now use the internet and arrange his big comeback. In January 2013, he launched his new site Mega with great fanfare. A softer and more legal version of Megaupload. That evening, the Germans' usual formula was evident with fireworks, techno music, and dancers on stage.
The mega man of the mega moment, multi-millionaire madman, Kim.com! Woo! Wow. That's a lot of people.
But the man seemed to have changed. Gone were the childish extravagances, Kim.com was wiser and more politically engaged.
No matter how many politicians you lobby, no matter how many sopas your money puts together in Congress, you will not succeed with your attempts to take control of our internet.
In fact, Kim.com now imagined himself to be the great defender of the free internet. He appeared at a conference with Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, and even got involved in politics by creating the Internet Party in January 2014.
Hello and welcome to the Internet Party. I'm glad to see you here. My name is Kim.com, and I'm here to introduce you to a new political party that New Zealand really needs.
He remade himself with quite a cheap purity by selling himself as this kind of digital Che Guevara.
For me, Kim.com almost has the aura of a guru. That is to say that he presents himself a bit like some kind of saviour of mankind, or at least the internet with his followers. And clearly, at least in people who know a bit about him, some are for and some are against. He leaves nobody indifferent.
Obviously, he sees himself as the third internet hero next to Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, where Julian Assange would be the guy who tells the world about secret governmental affairs, and Edward Snowden is the guy who tells the world about global surveillance. and violation of privacy. And Kim Schmitz thinks of himself as the person who tells the world about global media distribution.
A bet that he finally seemed to be losing. In September 2014, his internet party did not win any seats in the New Zealand general election. After 2 years of litigation, the trial of Kim.com is dragging on forever. It seems to be hitting him hard, and his enthusiasm is waning.
On one side, there's an American administration that wants to make him an example. On the other side, there's someone who is fiercely determined to not be sentenced, who has a lot of money, and therefore can bear the cost of the very expensive and very time-consuming proceedings, who can bear them for quite a long time. For now, it's a bit of a deadlock, it's a bit of a tussle. But the administration needs to realize that he still has a strong capacity for resistance. It's not just anyone who could be the stone in a shoe of this size, with regard to the American administration.
Increasingly alone, Kim.com is losing his New Zealand lawyers one by one. Pending the outcome of his trial, he still can't leave his home, virtually a prisoner in his fantasy amusement park.
He has had his periods of glory, and now we feel that he's at rock bottom. He now spends most of his time eating, sleeping, and playing Call of Duty.
Faced with a reality that he no longer controls, Kim.com seems to have become Kim Schmitz once again, taking refuge, as in childhood, in video games and the virtual.